Good evening, and welcome to the Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy. Today is July 5th, 2017. And today I only have a short clip from Alex Jones for you, about 6.5 minutes long. And he basically covers one of the major flaps, and it's almost comical, what it really is comical, that if you're at all tuned into what's going on, you will have seen or you will have heard about it, and that would be the CNN takedown, literal takedown, that Donald Trump tweeted. It was a meme that someone else put online, and then he thought it was funny, and then he passed it on, and this made huge headlines. What it was apparently several years ago, the WWE, which is the worldwide wrestling, big time wrestling or professional wrestling, which is, you know, the fake wrestling that they do that the kids love so much, some kids, they did a sort of a joke where he pretended to take this guy down in the middle of the wrestling ring or right next to the wrestling ring, and then he walks away triumphantly. Well, this probably young kid put the CNN logo in place of the guy's head that he took down. And so it looked like he was taking down CNN. Ha, 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 very funny. Well, CNN got so upset about this that they tracked down the young man, I assume it's a young man or a boy, who actually did this and put it online and threatened him. And threatened, we're going to expose your name on CNN. We're going to tell the world your name on CNN unless you apologize. So of course the kid just, oh my God, he fell all over himself apologizing. And then the CNN people, you'll see the clip on the Alex Jones clip, they're so proud that they did this. Well, they didn't realize what they were actually doing and what the backlash from this would be. And it was absolutely huge, because it turns out that here you have, as Alex Jones mentions, a multi-billion-dollar corporation threatening some kid, a nobody, with exposure which could have led to death threats and who knows what, a sort of a blacklisting from him from getting a job, or who knows, a lot of possible negative outcomes could have happened as a result of him having his name publicly announced to the world and to his family, embarrassment, shame, whatever. So it turns out this could be a felony. This is coercion or blackmail, and they're threatening him. And this is really pretty bad. So the backlash against CNN is pretty harsh among the internet people. Now, the problem is for CNN also is that they've already got in trouble for faking news stories, for lying on air, and then being caught over and over and over. They tried to smear Trump during his campaign by saying this guy Scaramucci, who was a Trump advisor, was colluding with the Russians. Well, this turned out not to be true at all. And so now Scaramucci is suing CNN for $100 million or something for lying about him. And it goes on and on. And you have the CNN commentators very sanctimoniously condemning this very funny little joke about the World Wrestling League, you know, with Trump, and saying that this is, you know, makes us question Trump's sanity, his competence, etc., whether or not he should be president. And so they're using the people who despise Trump are trying to use this as to build a case against him to use as to take him out of office, to completely, I guess, just drag him out of there and lock him up in a mental asylum. And I don't think that will happen. But I think they are so much against him and worried about him that they're going to try to think of anything they can. So let's watch the clip and then I'll comment about it.
Let's go to a few of these clips. Bernstein, Trump's CNN wrestling tweet causing military leaders to question his stability. Now, of course, they never actually tell you who the military leaders are. They don't tell you who the 17 intelligence agency heads are. Turned out that was all fake, claiming that they were unanimous. They always just have unnamed sources, and then some mummy like Bernstein, who was there that brought down Nixon, is rolled out, just like Tom Brokaw is rolled out to lie about me and spew some more garbage. Here it is.
Anti-CNN, it's anti-freedom of the press, it's anti-freedom of speech. It is a definitive statement by the President of the United States. And it also goes to the question that many military leaders in this questions are asked questions raised by military leaders in this country now, by the intelligence community, by people in Congress about the stability of the President of the United States. This is an index of his state of mind visually. It's very disturbing. There's nothing lighthearted about it whatsoever. It is an incitement. It is definitive, as I say, in the way this president views a free press and its exercise under the First Amendment to the Constitution, anti-CNN.
When they talk about incitement, these are the people saying kill Trump. CNN itself financed a play where Trump's killed. Their own employee, Kathy Griffin, simulated chopping his head off. Countless other hosts have called for his death, called for his imprisonment, called for his impeachment, called for violence against his family. We saw them having guests on saying the guy that shot Congressman Scalise was not a evil person and was just doing what he needed to do. We've seen countless examples where it makes your head spin to try to even recall them all. Countless examples. And then Trump retweets somebody else's tweet with a smackdown, and they act like it's the end of the world and have no context to what they've been pushing or what they have been doing. So CNN sponsors Trump assassination play, but that's okay. Here's another quote from ABC. Anna Navarro says, Trump tweet on CNN is an incitement to violence. No, you've started this war. He mildly tweeted back. You've got his head chopped off, blood everywhere, him being simulated, stabbed to death every night, your host calling for his death, Democratic operatives, on Fox News saying, yeah, I hashtagged hunt Republicans. You asked for it, now you're going to get it. You're the ones asking for it. But you sit up there like a bunch of cowards, nesting like a bunch of retarded vultures, thinking because you're all together in your little nest in New York and L.A. that you can just sit here and piss down the back of the American people forever. We see through you. We know who you are. We're aware of you, and we're continuing to expose you. Let's go to the clip from ABC. Here it is.
I'm a CNN commentator. I think that is unacceptable. I think that is the President of the United States taking things way too far. It is an incitement to violence. He is going to get somebody killed in the media. Maybe that will stop him. I am disappointed beyond belief by the answer that the Homeland Security Advisor just gave. What a wuss. What a wuss. You could see that he is ceding his principles. You are the Homeland Security Advisor and you can't stand here and say the difference between right and wrong. That's what's part of the problem. He is surrounded by enablers that do nothing but shake their heads and nod their heads in agreement with everything that he says. They have got to
Look
stop.
At this fake moral outrage.
For democracy, for freedom of the press. This is just going way too far. The President of the United States is inciting violence against the free press. In America, we cannot stand for it.
America, we cannot stand for it, when Obama is saying we shouldn't celebrate the 4th of July too much and that nationalism is dangerous. That's the headlines. Obama blasts aggressive nationalism, complains about Paris pullout in Indonesia. Here's another one. Obama warns Americans about too much patriotism on July 4th weekend. That's up on Infowars.com, his own quotes. You cannot make this up. Then you roll out some lady with all this, moral consternation and outrage. And she's like, how dare you do this to America? We have a free press. Yeah, you're calling for his death, CNN. You're pushing all this. So he puts out a joke tweet. Imagine, you come at him with a knife. He comes at you with WWE joke. You come at him with real gunmen, and CNN celebrates it. He comes at you with a joke. Just pointing out that, yes, you're the enemy. Yes, you hate America. Yes, you represent multinationals that want to end the sovereignty of this country. We don't want any violence against you, and President Trump has said that, and we've said that. And we have the WikiLeaks where you sent violent people, CNN, working with WikiLeaks, working with Hillary, all one big group. Not working with WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks showing that. Working with those Democratic Party officials that WikiLeaks shows to try to absolutely foment violence in this country that you could then blame on Trump. But it was you doing it. You got caught. You got caught. You got caught. We're going to come back and go to your phone calls, but I want to play a clip after we do that. GOP Representative Taylor to CNN. You guys are getting played. Absolutely. Trump is totally controlling them. Everybody knows it's the Democrats out there calling for violence. Everybody knows it's Soros. Everybody knows that they're the ones out there hitting people in the head with bricks and bike locks and knocking out windows. Everybody knows that you're the ones taking over the colleges and spewing racist garbage everywhere. Everybody knows this. So how do they hold two diametrically opposed thoughts in their heads, Democrats? That they're pushing for violence, they're pushing for death, they're making jokes about it, they're celebrating Scalise getting shot, they're saying cops deserve to get killed, all of the news, and then they turn around and say that Trump's the one inciting violence.
All right, we're back, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Alex Jones touched on a number of different issues in that short clip, including the Kathy Griffin, just absolutely horrifying little video clip that she posted holding up Trump's severed head covered with blood. This is the kind of shenanigans that typically go on in America. This is really nothing new. Much of American politics has been a circus for a very long time, since the founding of this country. And of course, sometimes it breaks out into violence. And so the political differences led to civil war once. And I think at that time, unfortunately, people wanted war, wanted a civil war, and I don't think that is going to be happening this time, even though there are elements that would like to see chaos and war break out against various factions, among various factions in the United States. I know that George Soros is working very hard through his various groups that he fronts, or he stands behind them and as the power broker. George Soros, of course, is the billionaire many times over who tries to work behind the scenes to change the world into the kind of world that he would like to see. And he uses his power to influence people and fund certain groups. That he looks at all these different groups and he finds whatever group that he thinks will be most beneficial to his agenda and then funds that group. And we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars, which can have a huge influence and impact and really get a group that's just sort of barely hanging in there to to function smoothly. Or he could even start new groups that hadn't even existed and just get them going off the ground and using the AstroTurf analogy. The grassroots is the original term, and then it comes up from the people naturally, organically, it just grows. That's grassroots. AstroTurf is where it appears maybe to be natural and growing by itself and organic, but actually it's completely fake. In other words, AstroTurf. So this is one of probably the more benign things that George Soros does. Actually, George Soros is a very big force for chaos and disruption in the world, and many people think that he really should be arrested. He's caused revolutions and he's caused the deaths of a lot of people by his actions. He's a globalist. He believes in destruction of the nation state, and that he is a citizen of the world, and we should all be citizens of the world. And this term, citizen of the world, people are using this now as a good thing. Some people, oh, I'm a citizen of the world. But in the old days, the idea of the citizen of the world was very sketchy. People would look at you askance. That was sort of something maybe a scoundrel would say, or a con man, I'm a citizen of the world. What it does is, when you say you're a citizen of the world, it makes people think, well, okay, you're a citizen of the world. Are you saying that the laws of nations are beneath you? They have no power over you? That's sort of what you're implying. Because what nation is going to curb the behavior or bring to justice a, quote, citizen of the world? And this is exactly the kind of world that the globalists want, in which they operate above the rule of law. The rule of law is really the bottom line here. If we lose the rule of law, no matter what that law is, then you lose a lot of your sovereignty, your national sovereignty. And you may not like a law, but it's much better to change that law rather than to go around that law or violate that law. Just because we want to support the nation state. Now, in reality, of course, many governments do pass laws that are extremely unjust, and you have people who try to circumvent those laws all the time. And this is the world we live in. So I guess you have to make a judgment call on each law, and you have to weigh whether or not this is a just law or an unjust law, and you have to make your own mind up. But I do think that we should consider following the rule of law just for the purpose of being consistent. You become a hypocrite if you follow some laws and don't follow other laws. And also, well, this is what our leaders do. The leaders will pass laws and then exempt themselves from having to pay the consequences of breaking that law. And we don't want to see that. This is another issue that is huge. This is another reason why we have to make our best attempt to follow the law, no matter what, whether we agree with it or not, just for the sake of the cohesiveness of the society. And we also have to hold our leaders to account, because we cannot allow a situation to arise in which they are typically given a pass and are above the law. And that's a serious issue, very serious issue right now in the United States and in the world, in the other countries of the world. So many countries have so many laws, and in fact, they're constantly passing laws. Like the EU, I mean, they're constantly passing laws. The European Council, on everything, and they're micromanaging everything down to the last detail. And so eventually what it does with so many laws is that you become a criminal even though you don't know you are. Because there's way more laws passed that you could possibly even keep in your brain and remember or even know about. And so anytime the police state wants to bring you in, they will find something to hold you with. I mean, it goes even worse than this. It gets even worse. I mean, you have the NDAA that Obama passed, which is essentially indefinite detention. They can hold you without charging you just because they want to. And they just passed a law saying that, or he did it through executive order, that he can just hold anybody he wants for as long as he wants. And this is, by definition, tyranny. This is what the American patriots fought against when they were wanting to create this country in the first place. Indefinite detention without charge. So that's what our Constitution and the Bill of Rights is all about. That's part of it. And we have, of course, all kinds of problems in this country. But we nevertheless still have what is now the longest government, the oldest government under one constitution in the world. We have the record. And every year, every day, it just keeps getting more impressive that we still have it. And this is one of the reasons why so many people want to come to the United States. As a resident and a citizen of the United States, I tend to criticize it and find fault with it. Well, it always amazes me when I meet people from other countries who are so impressed with this country and would really like to stay here. And of course, it's no surprise that so many people want to get here from so many different countries, whether it be illegally or legally, just because their own countries are so chaotic and so corrupt and so dangerous. Because when the leadership is corrupt and violent and above the law, then that tends to make certain elements of society believe that they can also function that way. They follow the lead of leadership. That's what leadership's all about. And so you have that plus all kinds of other powerful forces at work to create chaos in a society. And as you probably know, order out of chaos is a slogan from the Masons. It's been around for hundreds of years. And you wonder what that means. It's like order out of chaos. That sounds like a good thing. Unless they themselves create that chaos, and then it's very easy for them to bring order out of chaos because they know how it started. They're the ones behind creating the chaos in the first place, and so therefore, well, okay, we'll make it all better. We'll make it stop. Make the pain stop. We'll make the pain stop. If you just do what we say, then it'll be better. And it's like, wow, these guys actually made this better. This is amazing. How did they do that? It seems so easy for them. They just snap their fingers and it happens. Well, yeah, because they're the ones that started it in the first place. They, funded those, insanely radical groups. You have Antifa today, anti-fascist. These are mostly young people who hide their faces. Many of them are communists. They protest, they break windows, they hit people, they punch people, they push people, they scream at people, they give people the finger, and they're very childish. But I can remember very well back in the 60s when a lot of radicals were also very childish. And now many of them are actually middle-aged, getting quite old, but they have positions of power, many of them, in universities, in government. And these were the radicals with the long hair and the red flags back in the 60s, some of them. And they still have that ideology, that leftist ideology, which really never made a lot of sense to me, because how are you going to make this utopia? By government planning, by let us do it. You know, the idea is let us do it, let us take charge, we can fix it. Well, unfortunately, the world is way too complex for that. And one size doesn't fit all. People are individuals. They want to make up their own mind in most cases. And I think government does have a role, but we have to be careful that government doesn't overstep its power, doesn't get too much power. And the founders of this country understood that completely and were extremely wise in setting up a system of checks and balances that function somewhat to that purpose. For instance, Trump tried to put in place a travel ban on 6 countries. Well, judges said no. That's unconstitutional. You can't. They said this is a Muslim ban. Well, it obviously is not a Muslim ban because there are Muslims coming in from other countries. There are probably at least 100 Muslim majority countries in the world. Muslims are almost, or maybe they are, the biggest religion in the world. And so to say that stopping Muslims or vetting them or delaying them from coming or stopping them completely is a Muslim ban is completely not accurate. So right from the beginning, when the lower courts of the 4th and 6th District, I think, banned him from instituting this travel ban, prevented him from doing it. Right from the beginning, what I always heard, and I knew it would go to the Supreme Court, and I heard commentators say, well, it will most certainly be overturned in the Supreme Court. And it turned out it was overturned. And all the judges agreed that you cannot stop the president from instituting these kind of bans. Our law clearly states that the president has that power. Well, immediately at the very moment that decision was made, the mainstream media changed their tune. They stopped calling it a Muslim ban. Every single time they mentioned it, it was a Muslim ban. But as soon as the Supreme Court came through with that decision, allowing the ban for 90 days, they changed it. They changed what they said. They started calling it a travel ban. And of course, they couldn't say it was a Muslim ban anymore because the Supreme Court clearly said that it was not a Muslim ban. A Muslim ban would be arguably unconstitutional because that's selecting one group. And this is not one group, these are countries. Very selective, targeted. So you have now a situation where what was considered by many commentators to be an enormous catastrophe is working quite smoothly, and it's sort of dropped off the radar. Not that big of a deal. That was last week, but this week, travel ban, no biggie. No biggie. Now, the same thing is happening with a Russian collusion story. This was so huge. Oh my gosh. This is the biggest thing ever. And it was just pumped up by the media to be something that they talked about constantly. And they discussed it for hours and hours, endlessly. Every implication, ramification, the nuances were parsed to the nth degree. And gradually, over the last week, it's fading away, Russian collusion, because they still, after almost a year, 9 or 10 months, have not come up with a scrap of evidence that Trump colluded with the Russians before or during the election. And they say, well, what about Flynn? Well, what about, the Democrats did that. The Democrats have talked to the Russians. In fact, it turns out that the Clintons, Hillary Clinton, Podesta, the head of the Democratic National Committee, he was in charge of the election, but basically had more to do with the Russians than the Republicans did. Hillary Clinton was responsible for doing a deal which was very lucrative for the Clintons, which sold about 20% of the United States stockpile of uranium to Russia. And they made so much money on that deal. And I don't understand why that is not illegal, personally. And it just seems like to me that over and over and over, for decades, I've been hearing about the illegal activity of the Clinton family, and yet nothing ever happens. So what we may be seeing very soon is the final destruction of the Clinton crime family, because that's what you have to call it. I mean, Clinton started out way back in Arkansas, and Hillary Clinton started out way back in Arkansas. Committing egregious felonies. I mean, Clinton was involved back in the 80s with Iran-Contra in Mena, Arkansas. He knew he was governor of Arkansas. The CIA had a base outside Mena. The locals all knew about it. The politicians, most of them in Arkansas, knew about it. And in fact, they wanted in on the action. Arkansas was, maybe still is, I don't know, a notoriously corrupt government, state government. So they had an airfield. They were training Nicaraguan pilots to fly against the Nicaraguan government. They were training fighters. They were actually making weapons, guns, in that same area that were untraceable to the U.S. government. They were flying them down to Nicaragua to give to the Contras, to arm them, to try to overthrow the very left-wing government of Nicaragua. And they were, on the way back, it was a triangle, they were bringing in drugs to the United States to fund the whole operation. Barry Seal was involved. There's a book called Compromised, which tells the story of how Clinton got compromised when he was governor and was involved in this. This is one of the main reasons why Clinton got to be president, because he could be someone, they saw him as someone who was very smart, very clever, and who had a very shady past that they could use. Because what they do is they use your shady past as a weapon. It's the sword of Damocles they hold over your head. And they can, in other words, they know, and they know that they can take you down anytime they want. You get out of line, they can take you down. And they did eventually. I still am not clear exactly why they decided to take down Bill Clinton over the Monica Lewinsky thing, which was really minor. But they succeeded in delaying him. Now, I don't know if he had a change of heart or something, but Clinton had a lot going for him in their eyes. He was a sex addict. He had all kinds of skeletons in his closet with prostitution, and he was friends with this guy Epstein. Now this is more recent, of course. He's still hanging out with prostitutes. He can't seem to get himself away from that. This is why his comeback failed. One of the reasons, because he's just too hot. People are seeing it, because if people didn't know that he was a sex addict, then maybe the globalists could use him, because then they could expose him. But he's already been exposed. People know. It's all over the internet about the Lolita Express and the orgies, the underage girls, and so on. Now, Trump is a different animal. Trump doesn't have he doesn't really have any skeletons, because so much is known about him. He's been a public figure for a very long time, although he's not been a politician. And he doesn't think like a politician. He thinks like a private citizen. This is why he has this attitude that if you hit me, I'm going to hit you back harder. And this is what he did to CNN. Of course, CNN has been trying to destroy him, and along with the other networks, but CNN is one of them. They're right in there punching, like everybody else, against him. And so he decided to make a joke about CNN, just like he also made a joke about Mika Kaczynski and Joe Scarborough at MSNBC, at Morning Joe. And I did a little bit of research about Mika Kaczynski. Mika Kaczynski is the daughter of Zbigniew Brzezinski. And that name, Zbigniew Brzezinski, should ring a bell with you, because he is one of the major architects of the New World Order that they're trying to, and they've been trying to bring into full fruition in the world since before World War II, and probably earlier, maybe 100 years. It's taken them. But now the New World Order is exposed. The New World Order is the name that the globalists call their neo-feudalist globalist world that they want to create, with total control over the world, to get that dream accomplished of world domination, full spectrum dominance. So Mika Kaczynski is a globalist, and she is following the playbook and using her bully pulpit on this MSNBC show, which is actually not that popular. I guess only a few million people watch MSNBC at all. And I think the average age is something like in the 60s. So the young people really don't care. Nevertheless, Trump, of course, being an old guy himself, 70, he knows about what's going on at MSNBC, and it bothers him. And so he responded, and he does his usual thing by striking back, and he tweets. And so he said, that Mika Kaczynski and Joe Scarborough tried to cozy up to him a few times at Mar-a-Lago, which is apparently a hotel or a resort that he owns, and she was bleeding from a facelift. And he got all kinds of response about that, saying that he's into this blood thing about women, women and blood. That's a big thing for him, and he's obviously mentally ill from that. Well, it also turns out during that tweet that he said that he called Psycho Joe. And I thought, what is Psycho Joe? Wonder what that means. So I looked into that a little bit, and the Psycho Joe comes from this weird skeleton in Joe Scarborough's closet. Apparently, a number of years ago, an intern who worked for him was found dead in his office. And the story is that she fainted and hit her head on the desk and died. And so apparently this story has followed him throughout his career. This is when he was a congressman. He was apparently a congressman for only a short period of time. But he also has presidential ambitions. And what he's done is everything that happens to him that's bad, it always the opposite results. He fails upward. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before, but this is something that you see a lot, especially in government, where the worst guy, the most incompetent guy, the guy who should be fired, the guy who shows criminal behavior, who's really incompetent, gets promoted. So there is this feeling among the elites that we could use this guy. We can use this guy because he's really stupid, he's really incompetent, he's going to follow orders, he's going to do what we say without question. He won't be able to figure out what's really going on, how he's being played or used, exploited. So we could use him. And also, he has these vices. He's a this, or he's a that. He's a pedophile, or he's a gambler, or he's a drunk, or he's a drug addict, or he's a sex addict. We could use that guy. That's the kind of guy that we can use. Then they have something to hold over him. And people don't seem to don't understand how important this is in the world, having a hold over people. And this is one of the main reasons why there are so many pedophiles in the upper levels of government, because they're useful. And it also, you wonder, well, where do all these kids come from? I mean, where are they getting these kids? They're talking about trading these kids around and selling them and renting them out. And they apparently have these kids, some of these kids literally in cages. And they're just using them. And sometimes they just disappear. They kill them. And there's the stories about the satanic rituals where they're sacrificing babies and so on. I can't confirm this personally, obviously. These are the wildest stories you could possibly imagine, the most horrifying. But it is a fact that many, many, many more children disappear around the world than you would think would happen just naturally by itself. Something is going on. Those children are going somewhere. I was seeing something on the where people were talking about this the other day, and they said these refugees are the perfect source of children. They can snap up these children and disappear these children from these refugees, these illegal refugees that the immigrants, they're in the country illegally, they're hiding. They know if they're found that they're going to be deported, and if their child disappears, who are they going to go to? Who are they going to talk to? The authorities? See, that this is the problem with illegal immigrants. They can be so easily exploited in so many different ways. And some people say, yeah, bring them in. And you wonder, well, why do they want to bring these immigrants in so much? Do they want to exploit them? And this is, in fact, what is happening. So these liberals, are saying, we need more immigrants. So why? Why do you need more immigrants? What is your motivation, your true motivation for wanting to bring all these immigrants in? Because you can use them? Abuse them? So this is something that people, oftentimes I don't think people consider the possibility, so that their motivations may not be because, oh, we're so humanitarian. No, not necessarily at all. There's plenty of slaves who are illegal immigrants out there, sex slaves and just workers, whatever. And then the children are very extremely valuable. Hillary Clinton herself is involved in this marketing of children. This is how, they have to have these children to use to get people to do what they want, get the pedophiles to do what they want. And so you've seen a crackdown on these pedophile rings that are used up to the very highest levels of government this has been happening since Trump has become president. Trump knew about this years ago. I saw a tweet that he put out like in 2012, worrying about what was happening to all these children. We've got to do something about it. Something like that, it's a paraphrase. So he knew way back in 2012 about this enormous problem, this worldwide problem, about where are the children? What is happening to the children? Why are so many children disappearing? And I'm sure he knows probably a lot more than he's saying. But behind the scenes, because he has activated the FBI, because the FBI knows about this. Now, they're not going to talk about it that much. But you see the articles in the Los Angeles Times about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people being arrested in California. Children and young women being released from cages in apartments. Dungeons, literally. And you're rolling up these networks, and they're getting higher because the low-level people are testifying or giving names of the higher people because they're trying to get higher. Now this week, they've got as high as a close advisor, like the third person in command below the Pope, George Pell. He's a cardinal in the Catholic Church in Rome. He's Australian. And I just saw him, and they just arrested him. He's this old guy, and he denies the charges, but he's going to trial for multiple accusations of child rape. All these people who are probably now adults have come forward. I don't know how many, but a lot. A lot. And this isn't just an isolated incident. Anybody who looks at the Catholic Church over hundreds of years has seen this. This is nothing new. Pedophile priests, you keep hearing about this, but it just doesn't go away. And now it's to the very top, right next to the Pope, a very close advisor, a guy who probably talks to him every day. You really can't get any higher than this guy, George Pell, who's a cardinal in the Vatican, except for the Pope himself. So this is just huge. This is huge. And there are so many stories down to the local priest taking advantage of the trust of the children who are Catholic, little Catholic kids, children of his own parishioners. And this, I have to say, this isn't just the Catholic Church, this is many other churches. And of course, don't start saying that the Christians are the only ones that are doing this, because the Muslims are really bad about this too. And theirs is so ingrained and so part of their culture, it's just not even, I mean, it's just amazing how ingrained that is, that it's just acceptable, totally acceptable that adults would use boys for sex in Muslim culture. And look at Afghanistan, and particularly I hear it in relationship to Afghanistan, probably because we have a lot of American forces in Afghanistan, and they see this firsthand. I mean, I've seen very many, there are a lot of stories about U.S. servicemen seeing abuse of children by Afghans and trying to stop it, and then maybe they get in trouble because, well, this is their culture, and just leave them alone and don't say anything and just ignore it. But this is not the American way. A lot of the American servicemen, they're very upright people. You know, they come from the Midwest, you know, the Corn Belt and the Rust Belt or whatever, and they're like, you know, they're from Kansas or something, or and it's like, oh my God, this is awful. You know, we can't allow this. You know, we got to stop this. So, I mean, just because it's your culture doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's acceptable by any human standards. And no culture is perfect. Any culture that's perfect, you know, is lying. But people should speak out about practices that are inhuman, and maybe they can be corrected. There have been all kinds of awful things that have been going on in the world for as long as humans have been around. But there have also been people who've tried to change that behavior as long as humans have been around. And so this is an ongoing struggle. It's not going to end, but this is just part of life on Earth, life on planet Earth. So I think it's an obligation. People have responsibility and obligation to speak out when they see injustice in all forms. And I do think that many of the young people who are very concerned about the injustice in the United States, and there is injustice, and they have a right to go out and protest, and they should. And we applaud that. But we want to avoid violence. See, because violence usually really doesn't even work. It doesn't get your aims accomplished. I mean, even for you, you might think, well, we just got to get rid of these people. You know, they're bad people. But usually I mean, it goes back on you. It comes back on you. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. And you look at how violence works, and oftentimes people are incited to violence by people above them who are not really interested in righting the wrongs. They're interested in creating instability, creating chaos for their own ends. They may be arms manufacturers, and arms manufacturers profit when a war starts, because somebody's got to buy those arms, those bullets, that ammo, that ordnance, those airplanes, those ships, all the weapons of war. Somebody's got to make those uniforms. Somebody's got to, there's so many industries that are involved in war that there are people who profit. And they'll be willing to sell to both sides because they're interested in the profit. So they go one step further and they foment the violence oh, you know, things are getting too peaceful around here. Our profits are going down. What can we create? Even newspapers and mainstream media outlets are at fault, to blame for creating the conditions that foment violence for their own ends. It's not even about the money. Well, it is about the money. It's about the ratings. And we've seen this way back in the Hearst newspapers, the Spanish-American War. You know, I think it was like Hearst to Frederick Remington in Cuba or something. And he telegraphs them, you know, you provide the drawings, I'll provide the war. And so it's a collusion. You know, we can both profit from this war. This is going to be worth millions if we can get this war started, because then people will start buying our newspapers. And this is over 100 years ago. Well, now the same thing is happening. And we have James O'Keefe from Project Veritas, once again, getting a person in there and interviewing high-level producers at CNN and other mainstream media outlets, in which they get them to admit that, well, you know, actually there's nothing to this Russian collusion story. We know it. It's just BS. But it's all about the ratings. And so and they admit that openly. Van Jones, who's a commentator, very well-known guy, was asked, and I saw this, they asked him, well, what do you think about the Russian collusion story? And he says, oh, it's a nothing burger. It's nothing. Well, okay, so Van Jones doesn't even believe it's real. Well, Van Jones has a job. He's getting paid to pretend that the Russian collusion story is real. So it doesn't matter what his private feelings are, and CNN or somebody pointed that out. But he's just doing his job. And his job is to make money for the network, for the investors, for the owners, not to tell the truth, not to find the truth. And we have to keep that in mind. This is the world we live in. Okay, so that's all for today, and have a great weekend and sleep well.